Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Ray Donovan. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. A lot of the episode is Ray spending time with Mickey, and I love that at first, Mickey's trying to bring up the whole, don't you want to know how I got out? But Ray's kind of like, no, I'm not interested, and especially because he's like, it's okay that you were sad about me dying. Ray's like, what? It's almost like, shut up, Mickey. It just, because I'm sure Ray doesn't want to admit he was sad, just because it's like, for a moment I was sad, and it turns out, oh, you were alive, so it was almost kind of all for nothing, that sadness, not just me, but everyone kind of felt. But, I thought that was kind of interesting. Obviously, the whole point is to still point it all at Mickey. I mean, that wasn't the original plan, but, that was the original plan. Then they had to go with McGrath, and now obviously Ray didn't want to go down that path because his, ex didn't want to go down that path. So it's kind of like, McGrath was kind of Mac was a friend to him, especially when he needed one. Mac was there for him, despite all the complicated stuff of him kidnapping Bridget and everything. It was still his friend at one point in time. There was history there, even though it was a short amount of time. It was like, like I said, Mac was just there for him in a very important point in his life, So he was kind of down for being like, nah, don't worry about the frame job towards Matt. So it's like, hey, let's go back to plan A because Mickey's alive again. So going around putting his fingerprints everywhere and stuff like that. I even love Mickey pointing out the irony behind. He's like, oh, the urn was a nice touch, but I don't know about the eternal flame. Didn't know they made that. He's like, it is kind of a little messed. Basically being like, it's a little messed up. We actually think about how I quote unquote died for you to get me in the eternal flame or something like that. I didn't even think of the irony behind that last episode. Maybe that's kind of the point they were trying to make. They were being subtle about it. It didn't even cross my mind to think about the irony behind that. But regardless, them even stopping by Mac's ex's place, and that whole conversation about it was my dad that Mac had talked about had killed those cops or whatever. Yeah, this is him. And even she was like, this is the guy? And he's like, well, you ain't seen me at my best or whatever. So I thought that was kind of a neat little element of being like, what about Mac? It's like, well, Mac's not a cop killer anymore. It's like other shit he might get mixed up in, that's kind of on him, but we're not going to pin these murders he had nothing to do with, because I don't want that. He might have a complicated reputation, but I don't want to be, kind of besmirching the name of a dead man, once again, a dead friend, even more than I have to. So we're not going to go down that route. So I thought that was neat. And even Mickey being like, because for him, he kept saying like, oh, there's got to be a reason why I survived. There's got to be a purpose. Because I love that he made comparisons to his escape, comparing it to the Titanic, how the ship broke into pieces and one half sank and the other kind of he was basically making that comparison when the emergency door had popped open and everything. I even love later on he's telling Smitty this story, and Smitty's like, all right. He's like, Ray, have you heard this story? It's crazy. And Ray's just kind of unimpressed and being like, yeah, I heard it. He doesn't care. It's like, I got too much other stuff on my plate to really be worrying about Mickey's courageous story about how he managed to escape death. But I did like that being almost, and it seems like, I think that's a nice kind of message to the episode, that it is kind of like there is a reason behind Mickey not dying. And it's like, well, maybe it is to kind of put all the blame on him when it comes to this. But I even love that, even though it's like, yeah, we're framing me and everything, but it's like, let's not kind of make it too easy. It's like, oh, you wipe off all my prints. It's like, oh, let me put one of my prints here, and then it'll look like maybe during because of the murder and everything, I made a mistake and covered up. I might have accidentally left a print in my need to clean it. And then even signing his signature, and Ray's like, what the hell is that? He's like, the fact of the matter is, he's like, I might be taking you to rap for this, but don't make me look like an idiot. Basically, he didn't sign it as Mickey Donovan. He was like, yeah, they'll put the handwriting together and be like, oh, this fake alias I used. Because, to be fair, you lay out the evidence too thick like that, no one's going to believe it. To be fair, Detective Perry doesn't believe it, but we'll get to that soon enough. But I just thought that was kind of a neat element the entire episode of that whole situation. And even when Molly Sullivan stops by and everything, and Mick is there, he's like, Sullivan, you got family in Boston? And she's like, yeah. And he's like putting two and two together, and it's like, whoa, is that Jim Sullivan's kid? And because I had to look it up because I was curious about it. I was like, isn't that James Woods' character from season or season 1, yeah, I was like, yeah, that's totally him. It's Sully Sullivan. Well, just Sully, but regardless, I was like, oh man, that's so crazy. I completely forgot the name is Jim, but I vaguely remember the name Sully. I knew it was short for Sullivan, just like Sully from Uncharted, kind of in that same vein. I knew it was that, but I didn't remember his name being Jim. But regardless, I thought that was kind of interesting. I was like, huh, that's very interesting. It's kind of like, well, because I'm sure, because even for him, he's like, oh wow, she's grown up to be a beauty and everything. But it's just kind of interesting because it's like that complicated family history between the Donovans and the Sullivans, and it's just kind of like the next generations of them, that being Ray and his Ray having a connection to Sully's kids and everything like that. It is just kind of interesting in that regard. But regardless, I just thought that was all kind of like a fascinating thing. Turning things around really quickly, I like how they handled the Bunchy stuff this episode too, because I thought that's kind of neat. Because for him, he felt, it's like, oh man, I'm the hero. They're plastering it all over the place. He's like, hell yeah. He felt good, But then it kind of all comes crumbling down when he's like, he's feeling himself. Somebody's like, I deserve a raise. Come on, I saved the store and everything. It's like, no, you basically made us liable, because the fact of the matter is that's not our policy to handle things like that's, it makes you wonder when you see stuff like that, because obviously there's a lot of videos you can find online about like store owners and stuff like that, people fighting back. But then again, it's like, because it could go wrong, but that's also a situation of like, that's why some places are just like, let them take the money and just go. Don't try to be a hero, because it just, you could do more harm than good type of situation. It could get people hurt or even killed. So I think that's the mentality of the whole like yeah. But also what sucks is that because Bunchy didn't realize, he did shoot the kid, which we saw, but the kid is in critical condition. It's like, for one, it is kind of messed up when you do think about it. It's like the kid was robbing the place, but you shot him in the back, and Bunchy's like, wait, what? He's in critical. He was riding that high of like, yeah, I'm the hero, but he didn't realize like, wait, what? He felt bad about it, because I think, and we see him drinking later on, and he starts asking Ray. It's like, I testified, when it came to obviously what happened to him when he was younger, and he was asking Ray why he didn't testify, and he apologizes about it. But for him, it's a thing of him feeling bad, because it's like, I think it's like, it was a kid I did that to, which I guess in his mind makes him kind of think about what was done to him as a kid. Like, it's like an adult hurting you as a kid. Like, I think that correlated in his brain, and that just kind of made him fall apart, And even, he asked some interesting things. Like, for one, later on, he said something. He was like, are we bad sons? Because of the whole Mickey situation, which I'll get to in a second. But there was also that thing of him regretting it, which Ray was like, it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, you did what you had to do. No one else in that store had the nerve to do what you did. The fact of the matter is, when the time came, you stepped up, and But that's the thing of like, it's like when you say, you did what had to be done, I think, Bunchy doesn't 100% believe it, especially just everything later on. Because we even see at the end of the episode, he went to go visit that kid. Like, I mean, he didn't go inside, but I think he feels guilty about what went down. So I think there's going to be an interesting element to the story. I mean, I think it might also stem from the fact is, another element, and maybe this isn't something they're pulling towards, but you could think about it, it's like, well, he has a kid of his own, so maybe that is kind of what makes him look at that situation a little bit different. It could be a combination of his past plus having his own kid that kind of, messes with him when it comes to this whole situation. But I'm interested to see kind of where Bunchy's story kind of goes. I also really like Sandy's like cover stories for like the phone calls that the anonymous tips she was leaving. Like, one of them was like she was sucking off her John or something. Like, I'm like, did you have to come up? I mean, I love that, but the thing is, she could have just been like, oh, I found this and that, but she gave a whole backstory. And not even the lady being like, oh, is it this and that? And she's like, no, I'm asking you, is it there? Yep. All right. I love that being her response. I'm like, I just felt kind of interested that she kind of gave backstory. And even at one point, it's like, oh, you want my name? With the first call, she was like, you want my name? Well, the Bible says, our good deeds don't really count if we make them public. So, I love that she came up with some excuses like that. I just thought that was kind of neat. I also felt kind of bad that Mickey didn't get to talk to her. So I thought that was kind of a sad, aspect to it. But I mean, maybe time will kind of fix that. But, it's like, you're not going to talk to anyone because you're supposed to be dead, Mick. there's also the whole Claudette situation, which her showing up and being like, "Oh, I'm so sorry about Mickey," and Daryl had to be like, "Yeah, about that." It's like, okay, so there's that. Then there's Detective Perry sweating Daryl. I think she went after Daryl specifically because because she's a shark. She smells blood in the water. But I think it's also because she kind of sees Daryl as the weak link amongst the group. Because once again, he's an outsider in the Donovan family, that's kind of a sad thing about Daryl's story. It's always been his story. He's always felt like an outsider. He wanted to be a Donovan. I mean, because that, Mick is his dad and everything, but he always felt like an outsider because it's like, once again, it's like you were the son of Claudette, the woman Mick was having an affair with when their mom was dying, so it always led to that relationship being very complicated. And I love Claudette being like, "What was that all about?" And him being like, "Nah, it ain't nothing, Mom, I don't know." And she's like, "Oh, it sounds like some Donovan BS to me." And it's like, because to be fair, because even she hasn't seen Daryl for a while, and it's like, I'm definitely sure she's not aware of all the stuff that Daryl's gotten up to since he spent time around his dad and his brothers. So I think it's kind of, a complicated situation because obviously she doesn't want him kind of mixed up in this world, but he already is, and it's just kind of like, I thought maybe spending time with your dad would, maybe you wouldn't get dragged in all of this Donovan stuff, but apparently you still have. She's kind of got this disappointed look at him, especially when Detective Perry is asking, because it's like, oh yeah, people saw Mickey around the area where the boat was rented and the heads were ducked, but then the blackmailed kind of fitting your description was seen, which Claudette was like, oh, so my son's like the only person in this area that fits that description, so obviously they were giving her the tickets and the passes to kind of make it seem like, okay, so covering themselves for now, but once again, Detective Perry is making a point to come after Daryl. Do you even see the whole Claudette situation of her looking out the window and seeing Mickey in the car, and even Mickey's like, was that Claudette? What's she doing here? It's like, she came for your funeral. And for him, it's like, she came for my funeral. Because I guess for him, it's like, considering their history and everything, I guess he wasn't expecting much. Because obviously, she had moved on and everything. So I guess for him, because he was trying to pick, that was a couple seasons back, obviously. He was trying to pick things up with Claudette, but she had already moved on. She was happy to see Mick and everything, but she was trying to move on. She did move on, in fact. So I think for him to think wait, even after all this, I thought she kind of hated my guts, wanted nothing to do with me, or at the very least wanted nothing to do with me, but it's like she was actually coming for my funeral, The question is, it's more so she probably came for Daryl, but still, despite how she feels about Mickey, she still came anyway. So I think for him that kind of, speaks volumes. So they are trying to get Mickey to the Maldives, which is interesting because I was looking up the whole Sully situation, kind of recapping it in my head, and I was trying to remember stuff, and I was reading something about the Maldives. That's actually where Mickey was going. I guess it's always been his plan to go to the Maldives, so I guess that's always been his plan, and it's oh, we're actually going to be sending you there now, which obviously Mick is trying to even tell Bunch is yo, your bro's saying I can't stay here. It's but I won't cause no trouble, will I? I won't cause any problems, which even Bunchy, kind of being drunk as he is, just that's the problem, Dad. You're literally always the problem, And then there's that moment where he's whispering to Bunch and being it's you're my favorite. You're always my favorite son, which he was you say that to all your sons, which I like Mickey's response of and it's true every time. I'm which you could be oh, that's a bit of a cop out, but I'm a sucker for, family, and love in general. So I'm oh, yeah, all right. You got me with the cheesiness there, Mick. But, is Mickey going to stay going for long? I don't know. This might be the last time we see Mick. I kind of doubt it. Because Mick always has a way of just kind of coming back. Anytime he kind of goes away, he always managed to come back in some shape or form later on in the seasons. But, we'll see whether or not that ends up being the case in this regard or not. Especially because, he's supposed to be dead, so it's you come back to town, especially if we pointed all the blame on you when it comes to these dead cops, so. I also thought it was kind of interesting, because I think for Detective Perry, it doesn't matter, how much do they know about them being dirty cops is what I'm wondering. Well, because there's interesting little threads that are kind of going all around the episode that I'm wondering to see how they ultimately end up connecting. But obviously it's well, we know, I can't remember. Like, I feel like they mentioned the fact that Perry knows that they were dirty cops, or at least it's known that they were dirty cops, or maybe it's not known. But obviously, for her, she doesn't understand like what Mickey's reasoning would be to go after them. So that's why I'm thinking like she doesn't know that they were dirty cops. Obviously, in Ferrati's pocket, which is going to be interesting because obviously there's the whole Sullivan situation, which I'll kind of dive into a little bit. But basically, Ray kind of screwed him over, so he's probably going to be coming after Ray and his family. Which obviously there's Detective Perry who's already coming after the family, but then probably finding out like Ray might eventually turn to Perry for taking down Ferrati because of like, oh, the dirty cops that were on his payroll. That'll probably fill in the blanks of like these guys were dirty cops, or maybe Perry's going to figure that out on her own. I don't know. Basically, she's been shut down from the case, so I'm wondering because that dude, her chief or whatever, he works for Ferrati, right? So it's probably like. Yeah, like the fact of the matter is, it's all said and done. Probably doesn't want Perry diving too deeply. I don't know why I said that. Deeply and kind of unsurfacing some of the shady stuff that they were a part of. Or, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But I think those storylines are going to cross. Like, eventually, I think Detective Perry's going to be looking into Ferrati, whether it's on her own volition or whether it's because she locks up with Ray, or maybe it's a situation if she goes after Ferrati first, but then goes to Ray to potentially take him down. It's like, yeah, I know you guys are behind this, but you help me take down Ferrati, we kind of make this all disappear. Maybe not. We'll kind of have to see in that regard, or at the very least, all the frame job is going to be painted or pointed towards Ferrati. Maybe like trying to say that Ferrati had hired Mickey to do it, because it's like, yeah, Mickey's a scumbag. He's done some shady stuff, and not shady. It's just an understatement. Stuff in the past, that maybe he could be a hired hitman type of thing. I mean, which you actually think about it, it's like, well, he was literally hired by that FBI agent Frank to kill Avi a couple seasons back. So being hired hitman ain't too out there, regardless, So I'm curious to see kind of where that all ends up going, because like I said, she smells blood in the water. She isn't willing to back down. So there's that. And since I brought up the Sullivan situation, I thought that was kind of an interesting thing where like Molly showed up and she's like, I know you're not the type of guy that doesn't want, I can't pay you off, nor can I threaten you. So I'm going to try another approach. And she gives him a picture of her and Bridget. And it's like, your sister babysat me. I'm like, which I'm kind of like, oh, you kind of playing on his heartstrings. Yeah, you kind of using his dead sister against him like that. But, and it's like, oh, she said that you were the best person that she ever knew. And that kind of ties into something where, Ray talked to, his therapist and everything. And I thought that was kind of interesting where it's like, yeah, him and his sister had read a book or something. Yeah, and it was about a veterinarian or whatever. And Ray had been like, oh, yeah, like I thought about being a veterinarian. That's kind of where I kind of saw my life going when I was younger. And, helping animals. And then his therapist was like, helping people. And Ray was like, what? He's like, yeah, helping people. And I think maybe on some level that is what Ray wants to do. He wanted to do that, but it kind of got, being a fixer and everything. You can see the elements of wanting to help people, which in his own way he kind of has. Like, it's a very effed up way he's helped people in certain regards, but obviously things have kind of taken a shift, in the past where he has kind of done the right thing, but obviously that's always spiraled. It's always just kind of like a right thing to benefit someone else. But other times he does try to make things right in his own, right. So, I don't know. I just think it's kind of a fascinating situation. And I think him taking that, and wanting, it's like wanting to be a better person to help people. So he gives the photos to Molly because Ferrati wants to actually bring this up to the DA to kind of bring up charges. They wanted an actual kid, to kind of fit the description, to be like, okay, we saw the kid from behind, but it's like, okay, so now let's get someone who can probably look like that from behind to kind of fill the role of an actual kid and not someone pretending to be a kid, So I think that's kind of an interesting element. And he was like, you said my sister said that I was the best person she knew, and it's like, she's like, yeah. And he was like, that just didn't sound like her. It's like, but you thought I was making it up, which I think maybe there's a part of Ray that did. But I guess for him, it's like he was so lost along the way that I think maybe for him, he's like, I need to be a better person, I don't want to be this person I am anymore. I don't want to do this line of work anymore. So he's done with Ferrari. I'm thinking he's done with this whole fixer situation, because I think for him it's like, as broken as he is, this is not the best job to have, you know, because he definitely has a lot of underlying issues. So I'm wondering if that, I don't know, I'm interested to see kind of where that, you know, this whole storyline kind of goes with all that happening around him while he's still dealing with all of that. Just the whole Terry situation, I think, was kind of fascinating. Terry going with Liberty, they're going to meet some shaman, which I'm like, okay, I don't know whether this is going to turn out to be something like, it's hippie-ish, but maybe it's legit, or we tiptoeing towards some cult stuff. That's why I'm like, I hope it's not some cult stuff. I hope it is just something that is legitimately, well, legitimate. You know, even if it is something more like earthy or whatever, as long as it isn't something that eventually leads to like a drinking the Kool-Aid type of situation. We'll ultimately, we'll have to keep an eye on that. But I did like what that shaman said. It was just kind of, I don't know, like, not existential. I don't know that'd be the right word, but him telling Terry, like, your hands are still, it's the earth that's shaking. I don't know why. That line just hit me for some reason. I'm like, oh, that sounded like some deep shit. I mean, it might be something that's like you straight up pull that out of your ass, but, you know, it sounded deep. So I don't know. That resonated with me, him laying on the ground. Him seeing a deer again, which is interesting. It's like, that seems like that's going to be a thing, because obviously, like, that place they were at, like, you saw some drawings of a deer. When the bus exploded, there was a deer. And obviously there's a whole thing about Mickey. He kept seeing Mickey laying down. So it's like, oh, is that kind of signifying the fact is Mickey is going to die, whether it is at the end of this season or whether it was supposed to be a representation of that? That might be, you know, foreshadowing some stuff later on down the path of the season. I have no idea, especially because Mickey made such a point of like, oh yeah, I came back for a reason, and so maybe that reason might become clear. Maybe him being there is going to potentially shift everything for his family going forward. I have no idea what to kind of make of that, so that's what's kind of floating in my head on that regard. There's a whole situation with Bridget I think is kind of fascinating, her and Adam, which I'm like, they're singing together and everything, and then it's like, well, we see them kiss, and then we cut back, and it's like, her shirt's a little more unbuttoned, she's staring out the window. So I'm like, well, did it stop with a kiss, or did it go further? I kind of get it. It seemed like it's insinuating went further, which I'm like, yeah, it's actually kind of sad. I brought that up before, and I think that's such an interesting element where it's like, I think because of how messed up the Donovan family is, like, it's not a justification, but I think, like, they're so broken that cheating is almost like a byproduct of that, you know? And that's how I look at it. I mean, because obviously we know Ray has cheated so much over the course of this series. Now she's kind of dabbling in that. Obviously, Mickey cheated. It's actually interesting because I actually didn't ever correlate it to. It's like, well, Terry cheated too. Bunchy got cheated on, but he's never cheated. But it might... well, I was about to say maybe it might be because of his circumstances, you know, what happened to him as a kid, but it's like, well, same thing happened to Ray, which that kind of messed Ray up in his own way, just like it messed Bunchy. I think Bunchy kind of internalized a lot more than Ray internalized a lot, but I think he kind of, because of his him internalizing so much, he ends up being self-destructive. He's self-destructive in a more outward way. He kind of he's very angry and ends up like getting pissed off, and, you know, whereas I feel like Bunchy kind of keeps his bottled up. I think, you know, his is kind of very self-destructive in the sense that it is just, you know, his is always turned towards himself, whereas Ray kind of turns his towards his dad and everyone else, you know, which I didn't even talk about that. I did like that Mickey was like, I accept your forgiveness and I forgive you, and he was like, yeah, sure, whatever, and he's like, and I forgive you too, Ray. I think for him, he wanted to, you know, it's like, after everything, you know, nearly dying like that and everything, I think it kind of hit something in Mickey's head to be like, you know, I was that close, and the fact of the matter is, you were trying to give out an olive branch, so I accept it, and the fact of the matter is, and I think there was a part of Ray, the reason why he was kind of like, fuck you, Mickey, was because there was a part of him that did kind of feel guilty about sending him to prison for 2 decades, you know, so, and it, you know, everything else as well, so, well, not just the once, obviously, the multiple times sent Mickey to prison. Jeez, once again, it just shows you how messed up the Donovan family is. I don't know. Like I said, I might be reading too much into that old Donovan family situation and cheating, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. We do see Lena leaving at the end, which is kind of a bummer. I was almost halfway hoping that, Ray would come over, at the very least hug her or something, but it's like, no, didn't even shake her hand, and she's like, I gotta leave, I gotta go. It kind of, and even him just being like, no, I understand, it's just, she's part of the family. I kind of wish you'd hug her. So probably might be the last time we see Lena. I mean, I'm sure that probably depends on. I'm blanking on the actress who plays Lena's. Who plays Lena? Her name. It's Catherine, if I remember correctly. I feel like I always forget. Isn't it Catherine Mooring? I think that's her last name. I'm so sorry, but obviously, like, she's reprising her role as Shane on the L Word, Generation Q. So I'm wondering, it's probably that, so we probably, who knows if we'll see Lena for a while, or if at all, so. But I was just, like I said, I was just hoping he'd give her a hug or something, but I guess it's just like, well, that's not Ray's cup of tea, or whatever, I guess, hugging people, he's not the most affectionate person in that regard, so maybe not, I don't know. But obviously, I'm curious to see what ends up happening in this whole Sullivan situation, because it's like, well, you did them a solid. It's like, are they going to do you a solid in the future? The whole complicated not sure if they are aware of how deep the whole connection between the Donovans and the Sullivans are. I don't know if they are aware of that. Ray is, but I'm not sure if they are. So it might just be a thing of like, oh, we're going to, yay, he wasn't a total piece of crap to us. Maybe that'll be a good thing. Maybe it'll be a bad thing. Ultimately, kind of have to wait and see where all of that ends up taking us going forward. I'm very curious to see. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good